Sometimes the lessons we need most in love don't come from books or theories, but from the quiet, painful moments when connection begins to slip through our fingers. I once worked with a woman who told me about her partner, a kind, funny man who used to talk for hours with her about dreams, fears, and childhood memories. Over time, she said, he became distant, not cruel, not uncaring, just absent. He was there physically, but somewhere else emotionally, locked behind a wall she couldn't see. One evening during a simple dinner, she finally asked him, "Where do you go when you disappear like that?" He paused for a long moment and whispered, "I go back to the boy who learned it wasn't safe to feel." That is where emotional unavailability is often born, not from lack of love, but from old injuries of the heart. So the question is not, how do I control him to stay available? The question is, how do we create a relationship where it becomes safe for him to show up emotionally? Emotional availability is not a personality trait. It is a relational environment. We either grow in it or we shut down in its absence. Men are often taught, I don't cry, I don't need, I don't soften, I don't expose the tender parts. So when a man tries to open, he is often fighting a lifetime of conditioning that says, feelings are dangerous, closeness is risky. You do not melt this armor by pressure judgment or tests of love. You melt it with safety. When a man feels emotionally safe, his nervous system relaxes, his guard lowers. He doesn't have to be perfect, impressive, or invulnerable. He can simply be human. Emotional availability grows in the presence of a curiosity instead of accusation, listening instead of fixing, boundaries instead of resentment, and compassion instead of control. Your role is not to become a therapist or to lose yourself trying to save him. Your role is to be authentic. Emotional availability cannot exist where someone is constantly walking on eggshells or abandoning themselves. Invite him into connection, yes, but without sacrificing your own truth. Say things like, why? I want to understand you. Your feelings matter here, though. Well, we don't have to rush. What? I'm here and I'm also taking care of myself. When you speak this way, you are not teaching him how to feel, you are showing him it's safe to. And remember this, a man becomes emotionally available not when he is pressured to open up, but when he realizes he will not be punished for being real. The deepest intimacy begins when two people can sit together and say, I'm imperfect, I'm scared, I'm trying, and neither one turns away. Creating emotional safety instead of pressure begins with understanding that openness cannot be demanded, it can only be invited. When someone feels pressure to share, their nervous system goes into defense. They shut down, minimize, or withdraw, not because they don't care, but because they feel cornered. Emotional safety is the opposite of being cornered. It is the experience of being seen without being judged, heard without being rushed, and valued even when imperfect. When a man senses that expressing confusion, sadness, or fear will lead to criticism, lectures, comparison, or mockery, he learns to stay silent. But when he experiences a calm, grounded presence that says, through tone and behavior, it's okay for you to be exactly as you are right now, his guard softens. Emotional safety is communicated through small moments, not interrupting when he speaks, not weaponizing his vulnerability later, not demanding instant answers for complex feelings. It is choosing curiosity over accusation and asking, help me understand what's happening inside you, instead of, why are you like this? Pressure sounds like urgency, threat of withdrawal, or emotional tests. Safety sounds like patience, reassurance, and shared humanity. It does not mean tolerating neglect or abandoning your needs. It means speaking your needs without attacking his character. It is saying, I feel lonely when we don't connect, and I long for closeness with you. Instead of, you never talk to me, you're emotionally unavailable. Emotional safety grows when he learns that feelings will not be used against him, that mistakes do not equal rejection, and that he does not have to perform strength to be loved. In such an environment, vulnerability stops feeling like danger and starts feeling like relief. Listening to understand means you set aside the impulse to manage, repair, or tidy up his feelings, so they stop making you uncomfortable. Many people listen with a quiet agenda. How do I fix this? What should I say next? How do I prove a point? In that state, you're no longer really with him. You're in your own head. When he senses that you're preparing a response instead of receiving his reality, he'll start editing himself down. He might leave out the parts that feel too messy, too vulnerable or too contradictory because he doesn't want to be argued with, analyzed, or corrected. Emotional availability shrinks every time someone opens the door to their inner world and finds a critic, a teacher, or a problem solver instead of a witness. Understanding begins with allowing space. Let him finish his emotional sentence, even when it's clumsy, even when you disagree with the content, even when your own defenses flare up, instead of jumping in with, "That's not true. You shouldn't feel that way," or "Here's what you need to do." You might say, "So when that happened, you felt what?" Confused, hurt, angry. You're helping him stay with his own experience, not pulling him into your agenda. Avoid rescuing him too. Sometimes when we see someone we love in pain, we rush to soothe it away. "It's not that bad. You're overthinking. Let's just forget it." It looks like kindness, but it quietly sends the message, your feelings are too much. They need to be controlled or minimized. True understanding is willing to sit in the discomfort with him and trust that he can survive his own emotions. When you listen without judgment, you are saying, "Your inner world is welcome here, even when it's messy, even when it's inconvenient, even when it challenges me." That doesn't mean you agree with everything he says or accepts behavior that hurts you. It means you're separating his feelings from your response to them. You can draw boundaries about actions later, but in the moment of sharing, you protect the space for honesty. Ironically, when a man feels that he won't be corrected, lectured, or pushed into a solution, he becomes more open to reflecting, changing, and taking responsibility. Being deeply heard is often what softens defensiveness and allows him to see his own patterns more clearly than any advice could. Encouraging vulnerability by modeling it begins with accepting that you cannot demand a level of openness you're unwilling to offer yourself. Many people say, "I want him to open up," while hiding their own hurt, softening their own needs, or pretending to be fine when they're not. That creates an unspoken rule in the relationship. Emotions are dangerous, so one of us has to be the strong, composed one at all times. When you gently break that rule and reveal your inner world with honesty and calm, you signal something powerful to his nervous system. It is safe here to be a real human being. Modeling vulnerability doesn't mean oversharing, collapsing, or turning every conversation into a confession. It's about being authentic instead of performing. Rather than saying, "It's fine, I don't care," when something hurts, you might say, "A part of me feels really disappointed by what happened, and another part is scared to tell you that because I don't want to push you away." Instead of turning anger into attack, you might ground yourself and say, "I notice I'm feeling really tense and defensive right now, and underneath that I actually feel sad and unimportant." This kind of emotional honesty shifts the energy in the room. You are not blaming him. You are letting him see what's happening inside you. That transparency lowers his guard because he's not being confronted with accusations, but invited into your reality. Vulnerability invites vulnerability because it dismantles shame. Many men carry the belief that if they show fear, confusion, or pain, they will be seen as weak, unappealing, or burdensome. When you allow him to witness your own tenderness without drowning in it, you subtly rewrite that belief here. Tenderness does not lead to humiliation, it leads to closeness. If you can say, "I was really anxious today, and I felt like a little girl who's afraid she'll be left," and you survive that moment, you're not rejected, you're not mocked. You're showing him a living example that emotional exposure doesn't equal danger. Your calm body, steady breathing, and grounded tone act as a nervous system signal. What can feel big feelings and still stay connected? This also means taking responsibility for your own emotional state instead of making him responsible for regulating it. You might say, "I feel really triggered right now, and I'm working through it. I want to share it with you, not to blame you, but so you understand what's happening inside me." That balance, owning your feelings while still sharing them, can create some mature vulnerability that feels safer to mirror. He doesn't fear that if he opens up, he'll be swallowed whole by your reactions. He sees that this relationship can hold complexity, both of you can have wounds, triggers softness, and it doesn't have to collapse the connection. Over time, when you consistently show up with this kind of honesty, he begins to internalize a new script. Instead of "I must stay strong and shut down," it becomes "I'm allowed to be human here." He may first respond in very small ways, a slightly deeper answer than usual, a brief mention of something that's been weighing on him, a moment where his voice cracks and he doesn't immediately cover it with a joke. These are not failures, they're breakthroughs. Every time he risks a little more truth and discovers that you remain present, non-mocking, and regulated, his capacity for vulnerability grows. You are not forcing him to open, you are opening yourself in a way that makes it less frightening for him to follow. Respecting his pace while keeping your boundaries is about holding two truths at the same time. He has a right to his own timing, and you have a right to your emotional needs. If you try to rush his inner process by insisting he talk now, just say it, or open up properly, you may get words, but not real vulnerability. He might come play to stop the conflict, but his nervous system will feel invaded rather than understood. That creates a pattern where emotional conversations become something he dreads, not something he associates with closeness. On the other hand, if you silence yourself, minimize your needs, and accept constant distance just to avoid pressuring him, you slowly abandon yourself. Resentment builds, and eventually it leaks out as sarcasm, coldness, or emotional shutdown from your side. Then both of you are unavailable in different ways. Respecting his pace means recognizing that emotional expression is not a switch he can instantly flip. It's often shaped by years of learning that feelings are unsafe, useless, or shameful. So when he pulls back or goes quiet, instead of immediately labeling him as uncaring, you might see it as a protective reflex. That doesn't mean you tolerate endless stonewalling. It means you respond in a way that acknowledges his difficulty and your limits. For example, I can see this is hard for you to talk about, and I don't want to force you. At the same time, I need some emotional connection in this relationship to feel safe and close to you. You're naming both realities without turning one into an accusation against the other. Keeping your boundaries is not about punishing him. It's about being honest about what you can and cannot live with. A boundary might sound like, I don't expect you to share everything instantly, but I do need some engagement when we talk about important things. If we go weeks without any emotional check-in, I feel deeply alone. Notice the difference between that and you never talk to me. You're emotionally dead. The first reveals your inner landscape and the conditions under which you can stay open. The second attacks his character and usually pushes him further into defense. Boundaries are about your behavior too. What you will do if your needs continue to be ignored. That might mean taking space, seeking support elsewhere, or re-evaluating the relationship if the emotional desert never changes. Saying what you need without blaming requires slowing down and speaking from I rather than you. Instead of, you make me feel crazy with this silence, you might say, when I reach out and don't get much back, I feel anxious and unimportant. I really need some reassurance and presence to feel secure with you. You're not denying the impact of his behavior, but you're describing your experience rather than attacking his identity. This keeps the door open for genuine dialogue instead of triggering a battle of defenses. It also makes it safer for him to admit, I shut down because I'm overwhelmed, or I don't know how to say what I feel, which are often the truths hiding behind emotional distance. When you respect his pace and keep your boundaries, you're essentially saying, I won't drag you where you're not ready to go, but I also won't abandon myself to stay in a place that hurts me. That balance is what keeps you from becoming either a pursuer who chases harder the more he retreats, or a ghost of yourself who accepts emotional starvation as normal. Over time, this stance gives the relationship the best chance to grow. He learns that he has room to be imperfect and slow, but not infinite permission to disconnect without consequence. You learn that your needs are valid and speakable, and that love does not require you to disappear. In that tension, his pace, your boundaries, a more honest and sustainable form of intimacy can emerge. Recognizing old wounds behind his withdrawal begins with shifting the meaning you give to his distance. Many people assume emotional withdrawal equals disinterest, lack of love, or rejection. Often it's something far older than the relationship itself. When a man pulls away, goes quiet, or shuts down during emotionally charged moments, he may not be reacting to you as a partner. He may be reacting to echoes of his past. Childhood environments where feelings were met with ridicule, neglect, unpredictability, or punishment teach a child to protect himself by turning inward. A boy who learned no one listens Crying makes things worse, or my needs are too much, grows into an adult whose first instinct during conflict is to retreat, not because he doesn't care, but because withdrawal once kept him safe. Seeing his withdrawal as a protective reflex rather than a personal insult changes the entire emotional climate. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me that he won't open up?" you begin to wonder, what happened to him that opening up feels dangerous? That question alone softens judgment and invites compassion. This doesn't mean diagnosing him or excusing hurtful behavior. It means acknowledging that emotional patterns are learned responses, not moral failures. When his body tenses, his eyes glaze, or he becomes very quiet, you may be watching an old survival strategy come alive, one that formed long before you entered his life. Responding with compassion does not mean taking responsibility for healing his past or tolerating constant disconnection. It means you stop turning his withdrawal into a story about your unworthiness. Self-blame is seductive. It promises control. If I were better, he'd open up. But it only deepens your own wounds. Instead, compassion sounds like, "I can see you're overwhelmed and shutting down. I'm here when you're ready to talk. And I also need closeness in this relationship." You're acknowledging his struggle without erasing your needs. This stance keeps your heart open without abandoning yourself. When you recognize the old wounds underneath his distance, you also stop taking his silence as proof that love is absent. Love and capacity are not the same. Someone may genuinely care and still lack the tools to stay present in difficult emotional moments. Understanding this doesn't fix the issue overnight, but it removes unnecessary shame from both of you. It creates space for curiosity, therapy, growth, or new conversations that begin with, "What feels scary about this?" rather than, "Why do you always do this?" Ultimately, recognizing old wounds is about seeing the frightened child behind the withdrawn man while staying firmly rooted in your adult self. You can feel empathy for his history and still honor your limits. You can say, "I know this is hard for you," and also, "I can't live in permanent emotional distance." That combination, clear-eyed compassion without self-blame, invites healing rather than reenacting the very patterns that hurt him in the first place. Emotional availability is not created by pushing harder, talking louder, or proving your worth. It grows in the quiet soil of safety, patience, honesty, and self-respect. You cannot rewrite his past, but you can shape the present you share. You do that by staying connected to your own truth while inviting him, gently, consistently, into deeper connection. Sometimes he will meet you there, sometimes he won't, and both outcomes will tell you something important. The real work is not to turn him into someone else, but to build a relationship where both of you are allowed to be fully human, messy, imperfect, and still worthy of love. When love is grounded in compassion instead of control, boundaries instead of silence, and curiosity instead of fear, emotional availability stops being a struggle you're fighting for and becomes a natural consequence of feeling safe together.